All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cloud Experts Unleashed. And this week I am joined by, he's almost my co-host at this point. He's in so many of these. It's the xByte Cloud CTO, Mr. the legendary Dakota Clum. Welcome, Dakota.
Hey Ryan, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And today we're going to be talking about multi-node configurations. So for anyone out there, if you want to kind of follow along, you can go to our site. You can take a look at any of the Windows, Linux, ColdFusion pages and get an idea. So xbytecloud.com and just go to any of the xByte Cloud pages. And you can see there what we have. So we're here to talk about, okay, hey, I guess first of all, steps. Why do people need more than one server? So when you're taking a look at any type of clouds out there, a lot of times people say, "Hey, like I just need a server for my database, for my website. It's going to kind of run everything." But when do you need to go beyond just a single server, or is single server ever a good idea?
Yeah, yeah. Great overview, Ryan. So, as you consider a transition from a single node server to maybe a two node server or a multiple node deployment, something you need to monitor and kind of assess in your environment is what kind of traffic are you getting and what kind of performance are you seeing. When you look at a performant two node cluster, which is typically a web and a SQL server, at times that application that you're running, whether it be an ERP or your web server, that can be performance intensive. It could require a lot of resources. When that's sitting directly next to a SQL server that also requires those same resources, we can see a lot of contention, whether it be at the CPU layer, the disk and IO layer, or even memory pressure. So when you start to grow your application or as your demands rise, you can actually separate this SQL service and this web service to get more performance out of both servers for each individual service. So
Okay, so as people are looking at that, they're like, okay, hey, I'm beginning to see performance issues, or I've been running some kind of software to tell me how I'm doing. I see that there's a bottleneck. Let me go and split it out, and you go to performant two node. And then when you want to go to three nodes, is it typically? And I know on our website we show that we show a three node cluster example where we split out the two web servers. Is that typically what happens? Is where you split out the web servers, or is there an instance where you want to split out and to have one web and two database?
yeah, yeah, I think that's a great question. I'd say in our experiences, we typically see a lot of two web scenarios. Typically, the web layer is the most busy, or is receiving the most active transactions. So you really want those two nodes to be very highly available or performant. From a database perspective, typically we'll see a single server deployment. And with the
And
proper
I'm not
tuning.
going to go ahead and I don't want to interrupt you. Sorry about that. I'm going to go ahead and add in this page so people can kind of see here what we're talking about.
Yeah, so typically what we see is that two web and one SQL Server deployment as clients are looking into increasing the number of nodes that they have. Web is very straightforward to scale. From a SQL perspective, we find that that's typically more performance or fault tolerant as a single node for longer compared to like a web-based or web server-based environment. SQL is pretty performant and tolerant. As long as it has the resources it needs, everything's tuned properly from an index perspective, it can really sustain a lot of load. Now, of course, there are scenarios where you do want to add, clustering capabilities or additional database nodes, but typically web is where we start. So.
Okay, where you see you get a bunch of a bunch of customers coming in there. It's a good thing, right? You're
Right.
doing a bunch of business, and all of a sudden, you're like, okay, I need a separate web server. And you see here, there's Cloudflare that we recommend for a load balancer. Is is that all people can use? Are there other load balancers out there, or why do we choose Cloudflare?
Yeah, that's a Great question. So, Cloudflare is not the only load balancer that's out there or that can be used in our environment. We would actually support any load balancer, that client, whether they have their own licensing for their own load balancer or just wanted to use something else. We prefer and strongly recommend Cloudflare just for all the benefits that it provides kind of natively or out of the box. It's the DDoS protection, it's the web application firewall, the DNS services. Cloudflare is really great in that regard, and it can really help, protect your exposure online. So all of the requests that are coming into your infrastructure would start at Cloudflare, um, which can really block a lot of that bad traffic at the edge before it ever even reaches your server. So.
Okay. Now with Cloudflare, they also give you a CDN. Is that included in their base package?
Yeah, they do include a CDN as well. So when you think about performance and the ability to load anywhere in the world quickly, Cloudflare will cache a lot of your static content and make that available on one of their servers that are closest to you. So
Nice, nice, nice. Okay. So then you have the 3 nodes, you're going to 4 nodes. You talked
mhm.
about before, okay, there's some instances that you want to move to that. So kind of what tells you should go to a 4 node? And then typically we see that, and we also see some geo failover
Yeah.
involved in there. So can you talk us through some of that architecture and why the decisions to go to 4 nodes?
Yeah, so typically what we see, in a two node or two web node, two SQL node environment is really where that line's starting to get drawn or that need is arising for that geo failover option. So what we'll see in a lot of deployments is one web server and one SQL server in one data center, and then one web server and one SQL server in another data center. Replication can be established between the two. So not only at that point do you have a highly available application, but you have a highly available application with geo failover capabilities. So there's a lot of built-in redundancy there. Not only that, it can be more performant, especially if you're load balancing between two different data centers and doing location-based load balancing. Um, so it can be more reliable in that regard. What I've also seen for node deployments used for is maybe it's two web servers and then you have a primary SQL server, and then they're using the secondary SQL server as like a reporting server. So they'll replicate all of their primary databases and they'll run all their large reports, nightly reports that are potentially database intensive or can use a lot of resources. That's been a deployment model I've seen. So
So with Microsoft SQL Server, it's the that we've talked about this before, but you need to, is it Enterprise Edition where it does the replications for you,
it is a standard
or
editions
Standard
group.
Edition? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I'm glad I asked the question because I was wrong. So and then Standard Edition, the how does that work when you have replication across multiple geographies? So if you had, let's say, a central US, maybe if you had East Coast or even Europe, how does that architecture have to change if it's not in the same in the same land?
Yeah. So from a licensing standpoint, it's all still the same, still requires SQL standard. The biggest thing you have to look for in any kind of replication scenario or multi-node scenario is that synchronization capability and what the overhead of that is. So between multiple data centers, is it all read write? And are all the nodes waiting on a write to complete across all the nodes before they start reading again? There can be a little bit of a performance impact there, so you really have to assess what is the performance of your replication, how far of a distance is it traveling, is it introducing any bandwidth. um, those are the main things. So
Okay, interesting. And we talk about Microsoft SQL Server in this example, at least on the Windows page.
yeah.
For MySQL, can that also do the same sort of replication, or is that a feature limited to just Microsoft?
No, so MySQL has a lot of built-in capabilities. It has native replication that can be set up between multiple nodes. It's got clustering capabilities, for more highly available deployments. And I'd say the barrier to entry is a lot lower with MySQL just for all of the licensing differences. So it's really community-driven product, and you can kind of get right in and start using that at no cost. So.
Okay, so that also allows it to be done on Linux then. So no
Oh yeah.
problem with Linux in multi-server environments. Is there any extra software required for MySQL, or is that all built into the MySQL product?
So yeah, that's all natively a
Okay,
part of the MySQL product.
very nice. All right, and then so we give examples up to here to 4 nodes,
Mhm.
but we have customers who are more than 4 nodes.
Oh
What
yeah.
what what drives them to go beyond just simple replication here? Is it just purely
Sure.
performance?
Well, yeah, at a certain point, it really becomes performance driven. So, when you look at the two web and the two DB, there could be other sub services that are still a part of those that can be broken out. So, at a certain point, you may want to take the sessions that are located on the web server, for example, and move that to a Redis, caching and session management database. Also, you could have mail or, some kind of email deliverability, a part of the web server. You could break that apart and, put that into its, own node environment and use that for delivery. Um, you know, Even from the web perspective, as your application and your needs keep growing, you may hit a peak in that 4 node environment where maybe you need more performance at the web layer, the two web servers. You could add a third web server to help with overall, load and performance and reliability. So
I guess if you're caching, if you could have does a question here. So we talk about geo-failover and having servers based in different geographies to help out with actual load coming from
mhm,
a certain area. What does Cloudflare do that is there any overlap in what Cloudflare does from having their edge servers located near customers compared to what benefit a customer would have with having the actual physical server or at least infrastructure in like the East Coast?
sure. Yeah, I think with Cloudflare, one of their load balancing capabilities is actually geographic based load balancing. So they can tell, depending on what you have set up in Cloudflare, what server you as a visitor need to be routed to for the best performance. So that that's one kind of native or um, immediate advantage you get with something like Cloudflare. A lot of the load balancing tools I've seen have similar capabilities. It just requires a lot more, could require a lot more of a manual setup in that regard. So,
Okay, so if Cloudflare will bring the benefits, so you may not need to have um, uh, from a performance standpoint, you may not need to have servers located in different areas if you're running Cloudflare.
well, it does depend, right? So, not all the content by Cloudflare can be cached. Anything dynamic that requires loading on a server, that there could still be um, a certain level of latency there, right? So, at some point you have to really look at the demands of your application, your customer base, or where you expect visitors to arrive from, and you can build an infrastructure based on that.
Okay, so it sounds like it's you're in it, and you need a partner out there who's going to kind of walk you through everything. And when you get to certain bottlenecks or limitations, to be
Yep.
able to proactively look at that, or even before you get to that bottleneck, to have that
Mhm.
partner like an xByte Cloud out there helping monitor things for you and giving you some direction on what the next what the next iteration of your environment may look like.
Yep.
Sorry, guys, had to add some sales in there. I can't help myself.
Totally
All right,
fine.
Dakota, any final words? We had some great discussions today.
No, I think this, covers it at a high level. I'd probably just end with, each multi-node environment's different, right? So as I had mentioned earlier, you see kind of, a 4-node option, a 3-node option. There's 6-node options out there, 8-node options. Really, the benefit of a cloud or cloud provider is their ability to scale and meet your needs. And that's kind of what we aim to do here at xByte Cloud. So, we understand the need to cater to your environment and your demands, the demands of your application, and can really help you build that multi-node infrastructure. So,
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dakota. And I hope everyone learned some information here. And as they're looking at their applications, to figure out when they need to move to each of the different variations. All right. Dakota, thank you very much. I'm Ryan Brown. This has been Cloud Experts Unleashed. Thank you guys and have a great day.